Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I would like to say hello to some people that say hello to me on the chat. We have here Tech Lead Automation, we have Santano Roy, we have Eric Borte, Sebastián Carballo, and we also have Tix G, who's joining from India, from Maharashtra. And then we have also Arshal. So thank you so much. And also Kumar. Hi, Kumar. So thank you so much for joining today. And I will introduce myself in case that you don't know me. I am Alba Rivas. I am a Salesforce developer and a Salesforce developer advocate. And today we're going to see an overview of developer tooling. We are going to see developer tooling from scratch, which tools you need to install in your computer to work with Salesforce effectively as a developer, and we're going to see how to use them, right, to become much more productive. First, I want to start by responding a question that was asked on the chat by Sebastian. So Sebastian asked in the chat that he wants to start a career in the Salesforce development world, and he doesn't know where to start. So for that, I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'm going to share with you a couple of links that can help you know where to start. So the first link is Trailhead. Trailhead is our tutorial-based learning platform. Is a gamified platform in which you can take like different trails, different modules to learn about specific role and about specific features and technologies of the Salesforce ecosystem. Here we have. I was not sharing, sorry. So on Trailhead, if for instance you want to become a Salesforce developer, you can go to Learn Trails and take a look at all the trails that are available. Trails are guided paths that contain modules that you have to read, and normally at the end you have hands-on challenges like little games that you have to complete, maybe creating some code in your Salesforce instance, and sometimes like doing something declaratively with no code, and it's really cool to start from here. And I'm glad to tell you that we just updated this week our developer trails. So if you want to start with Salesforce development, look for the developer beginner trail and try to start from there. It will give you like a quick look of what a Salesforce developer does and what a Salesforce developer needs to learn to build applications on the Salesforce ecosystem. And then you can continue. There is also a developer intermediate and a developer advanced. So you can continue with those trails if you want to. Another resource that I posted on the chat window is the Salesforce Developers group on the Trailblazer community. This is an online group in which you can ask questions, and there are normally thousands of developers looking forward to answering your questions. So make sure if you have doubts, it can be a doubt about technology, but it can be also a question about career or any question that you want to ask. Make sure to go there and ask the questions, because as you can see, there is a lot of interaction here, and also not only developers but product managers and other Salesforce professionals are looking at this group. And then if you prefer like in-person meetings, there is another web page that you can go to, which is trailblazercommunitygroups.com, and here you can find meetings next to your city, this time in-person meetings, right? So for instance, I live in Granada, so if you take a look at Granada, it happens that there is a community group in Granada. And in that community group, there are other Salesforce professionals who meet regularly, like in a physical place, to talk about Salesforce and to learn about Salesforce technologies. So these are my tips, Sebastian. Hope that it is helpful. Okay, I have a question from Tix G, who's asking if I can suggest how to get and find collaboration with Trailblazer mentors. So these are two places in which you can find that, and there is also a Trailblazer mentorship program that you can join. Okay, this is not specifically technical, but it can like guide you through different ways within and throughout the Salesforce ecosystem. So I'm going to paste this also on the chat just in case you wanna use that. Okay, fantastic. So then Shereyas is asking a question. That question is very specific and it's like a little bit complex for the tools that we are going to see today. What I recommend you to do is to post that in the Trailblazer community Salesforce developer group, this one here that I shared in the chat, and that way you will be able to find the relevant person who knows about it and it's able to respond. And if you don't find anyone, please tag me. You can look for my name, Alba Rivas, and tag me and I can help finding the right person for you. But I would like to start with the demo today because we have a lot of things to cover and I would like to be able to do that within an hour. Okay, I want to say hello to Steve, who has just joined. Thank you so much, Steven. And also Ketan. Ketan is asking, well, another question related to developer career. Can you describe the daily responsibilities, tasks that a junior, intermediate, and senior Salesforce developer would typically have? I can spend a little bit more time of that. So a Salesforce developer is someone who builds applications on the Salesforce platform. Okay, the Salesforce platform has some tools that allow you to build applications, build pages, implement business logic without code, right? But when you have like a more complex use case or you want to create something which is really, really custom, there are also development languages available. Okay, so a portion of the time you are going to be building things with point and click without code, and I would say most of the time you will be building applications, building UIs, and building business logic by using code. Okay, there are different coding languages that we use in Salesforce. So for the backend, we use Apex, which is based in Java. It's like a smaller version of Java, I would say, because you don't have all the Java libraries available, but the syntax is pretty similar, so it's really easy to learn if you have Java or C++ knowledge. It's an object-oriented language. And then for the front end, we use JavaScript and we use web components. Okay, and so the task that a developer would do is to code in those technologies, and it depends on the expertise. You would code more difficult, more complex things or less complex things. Okay, so with that, we're going to start talking about tooling. So first of all, if you want to get started, get your hands on with a Salesforce environment, what we call a Salesforce org, but you don't know where to get one, today is your day because it's completely free to request an environment, and you can do it in this web page here. Okay, developer.salesforce.com/sign up. I'm pasting that into the chat. So here you come and you say, okay, I'm going to request an environment because I want to try out Salesforce, right? You complete the form, you say, okay, this is my first name, last name, my email. Oh, sorry. My email. Then my role, I'm a developer. My company, I work for Salesforce. I work in Spain, but normally what I do is to select United States because I like my environments to be in English, and when I select Spain, my environment is spin up in Spanish, and I don't like it because I'm used to the technical terms in English. That's why I always select United States, but you can select another country if you would like, and then you include your postal code, and then here you have to specify the username that you want to have. Usernames are unique around all Salesforce and all the Salesforce environments or the Salesforce orgs, right? So here I recommend you to be like a bit original. So for instance, if I'm going to create an org because I want to try out developer tooling, what I normally do is that I create a username that has something to do with that. For instance, alba@devtooling.net. The username needs to have the form of an email, but it doesn't need to be an email. It's just a unique identifier for your user in Salesforce. Okay? And then you agree and you sign up. Sometimes it takes some minutes for the email to arrive, because when your instance is created, you are going to receive an email saying that you can log in. So what I did was to already press that button like 15 minutes ago, and I have received an email saying that my Salesforce instance, my Salesforce org is already available, and that I can like verify my account. This is the username that I specified before, and this is the URL from which I will be able to log in. There are two URLs from which you can log in. There is a generic one, which is login.salesforce.com, and there is a specific one that contains a domain that has been specially activated for your org. But if you go to login.salesforce.com for testing purposes, that's completely fine. So here you specify a password, and for instance, in which city were you born? Granada. Okay, so here I have my development environment available for me to play with it. Okay, here I can see that some of the Salesforce apps are available, well, most of them, because this is a developer org and it contains like a subset of the features that would be available in a production org, but it contains like really a big subset of them. So you can see, for instance, our service application. You can take a look at our sales application here, and well, all the apps that Salesforce has available. Okay, so once you have your org, it may happen, so you may be joining this stream because you already have an org and you want to learn more about developer tooling. Maybe you are new to Salesforce, maybe you are still using the developer console. The developer console is a web console that was created for development like 15 years ago. Okay, so some people still use the developer console, but I can tell you that that's not the most efficient way to work as a Salesforce developer, and I strongly recommend you to switch to Visual Studio Code, which is what we are going to use today. Yeah, so maybe you're joining because you already have an org, you already have some experience developing on the Salesforce ecosystem, and you want to know which is the recommended tooling as of today, or maybe you're joining because you want to know more about Salesforce development in general, and that's why I told you first how you to create a development org. A developer org is really called. Okay, so next, what we would do next. So I told you that we are going to develop with Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is an IDE that you need to install in your machine, and it's like very, very popular in the developer community, in the third-party developer community, like for many other technologies such as Node.js or Java or C++, etc. And it's really, really, really useful for becoming a successful and efficient developer. Because in Visual Studio Code you can install extensions that are going to give you capabilities of all kinds. So you're going to have like linting capabilities, auto completion capabilities. You're going to have like much better syntax, highlighting schemas. You are going to have extensions for testing, like for making test automation easier. You are going to have extensions for instance, for debugging, right? And so on. So strongly recommended to use Visual Studio Code. So if you want to use Visual Studio Code, you need some way, because Salesforce Or is something that's on the cloud, right? So you need a tool that allows you to send your code to the cloud, your code changes, right? Your classes, your triggers, and also retrieve that code from the cloud. And for that, we have a tool that we released a few years ago, which is a command line interface tool called the Salesforce CLI. So next thing to do once you have your developer org is to come here to this web page. I'm going to paste it also on the chat and install the Salesforce CLI. There are several ways to install it. So for instance, I'm using Mac OS, so I can come here, download the package file and double click on it to install, and that's it. But there are like many more ways to do that. For instance, you can install it in Windows with a .exe file. You can install it with a tar file, and you can also use npm to install it. Okay? So very simple. I'm not going to do it because I have the Salesforce CLI already installed, but this is a step that you will have to perform. Then you will have to install Visual Studio Code. As I told you, this is the IDE that we are going to use. Again, this is something that I already had in my machine, but it is super simple to install. You just download the executable file and you install it in your machine. And this is how it looks like. Once you have Visual Studio Code, the IDE that we're going to use for coding, and you have the Salesforce CLI, then there is something else that you can install, which is Node.js. Node.js is not, I would say, compulsory for development, but it's strongly recommended that you install it, because when you create a Salesforce project, the Salesforce project is going to be really a Node.js project, and you can install dependencies, libraries that live on npm, on a Node repository for packages that will help you be a more productive developer, and will help you make sure that your code is a good quality code. Why? Because there are extensions that are going to allow you to run automated tests. There are extensions that are going to allow you to lint your JavaScript code to make sure that you are following the best practices that are recommended. There are extensions that are going to allow you to run prettier, for instance, to format your code. If there are several developers working on the same project, this is especially important, right? That we all follow the same coding conventions. And the way in which you can install those dependencies seamlessly in your Salesforce project is by installing Node.js. Okay? So this is another recommendation of things that you should install in your machine. I wanted to mention that the workflow that I'm going to cover today is I use Visual Studio Code in my machine. I need to install it, and I need to install the Salesforce CLI and some more extensions with it, but there is something that we are working on, which is a web IDE, which is currently in beta, and that is exactly the same than as Visual Studio Code, but running in your browser. Okay, so this is something that you can also try out if you want, but today I'm going to focus on the I work from my local machine flow, because CodeBuilder is still in beta and I always work from my local machine. Okay, but so that you know, this is available for you to try, and when this become GA, generally available, it's going to be very useful for a lot of developers who maybe can't install like many tools in their computers, in their work computers, right? Okay, I'm taking a look at the chat. Maria Alexander asks about which is the IDE to use. Is this one? We're talking already about that. And TixG asked if I can send my Twitter. Of course, my Twitter is AlbaSFDC. You can follow me there and you can ask any questions that you have. Maria Alexander is also asking, can you share some references on how to write Apex code with optimized code? Okay, so Maria, that's a follow-up question, because today we're going to focus on tooling, but something that you can do is to ask that in the Trailblazer community group that I shared before, and tag me, and I can share some references with you afterwards. Okay? So fantastic. We've installed everything. Well, I cheated a little bit because everything was installed in my machine, but this is what you should do. So once you have installed all these tools, the command line interface tool, VS Code, etc., then the next thing that you will need to do is, in Visual Studio Code, install the Salesforce extensions. The Salesforce extensions are the libraries that are going to provide you auto-completion capabilities. They are going to expose some shortcuts in Visual Studio Code that can help you use the Salesforce CLI in an easier way, okay, and much more. So how do you do that? There are, like, here you go to Visual Studio Code, and there is a tab here, a section in which you can see the word extensions. So you go there, and here you can look for Salesforce. When you look for Salesforce, look for the Salesforce extension pack. I have the expanded one installed, and look, there is an update, so I'm going to apply that update, taking advantage that it is already there. And that's it. It's super simple. Just install the extension, and that is going to enable a lot of tools in Visual Studio Code that are specific for developing with Salesforce. Fantastic. So what's next? Next, we are going to generate a project. Okay, to generate a project, now, not only to generate a project, but to execute any action on your Salesforce or from VS Code. From now on, there are going to be two ways to do that. One of the ways is going to be by typing a command in the Salesforce CLI. If you are a person who loves commands and loves typing on the terminal, this is the way that you will normally use, and this is how I normally do it. And there's going to be a way which is with point and click. So thanks to the Salesforce extensions that we install, almost all the commands that you can type and execute using the Salesforce CLI are going to be available here in a shortcut or in a command that you can just click. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So if I want to create a project, okay, I need to write. So one option is to write a command with the Salesforce CLI, which is the next command. It's sf project generate minus name and the name of my project. for instance, I'm going to call it my project. This would be one way of creating it. Okay, I'm going to execute it. Minus n, my project. I'm going to execute it, and now you can see that it says that some files have been created. And if we take a look at the folders that I have available in this folder, right? I have my project, so I can cd into that folder, and I can take a look at all the files that have been created. Okay, that's one way. But what I was saying before is that thanks to the Salesforce extensions, you can open the command palette in Visual Studio Code and find equivalent shortcuts for executing those commands. So for instance, well, all of them start with sfdx, right? For instance, here we have a command called create project, and this would be exactly the same than creating the project with the command. Okay, so if you're a person who doesn't like commands or typing things on the terminal, you can follow this same approach. I'm not going to create the project because I already created one, but always think that there are two ways in which you can do that. Okay, fantastic. So something that I want to explain, this command that I executed, I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger just in case. You see that it starts with SF. Okay, you're going to see that in the help, in the documentation, there might be places in which commands start with sfdx. Okay, this is happening because of historical reasons. Okay, sfdx was the first executable that we created for the Salesforce CLI, and SF is a new one. Okay, so if you're new to Salesforce, just start using the new one, because the new one has commands that are more efficient. The syntax of the commands with the new SF executable is simpler, although we are like adopting that syntax as well in the sfdx executable to make simpler the migration from one CLI to the other one. But if you have a choice, just start with this. I was still using sfdx like a couple of weeks ago, but I started with SF very recently, and I can tell you that it's much easier to use and that I'm enjoying that experience. Okay, so explained that, let's continue with our project, right? We have created a project, but this project is in our local folder, is not really connected to our Salesforce org yet, and this is the next thing that we need to do. Okay, connect our project to the developer org that we created before. First, we're going to open the project, because here, well, there are some ways in which here I don't have any folder open. If I go to files, I don't have any folder open, and if I want to open the project, I can do it from here, for instance, and I can find the folder and open it on the left hand side, and that way I'm able to see like all the files that have been created for me with that SF project create command. By the way, when I executed the command, I executed it in the terminal. This terminal is Visual Studio Code integrated terminal, but is equivalent to the terminal that you can use, that you can open in your computer, right? In Windows or in Mac, it doesn't matter. It's equivalent to that. Let me close some warnings. The warnings are telling me that I'm not connected to any org. Of course, I am not, and that is what we are going to do right away. So why do I open the terminal here? Because it's very convenient to have the terminal and the ability to navigate the different classes and the different files that my project has. For instance, this file here, which is the definition of the configuration for this project, which is a Node.js project. Okay? So, how do we connect to the OR? Again, this is something that we can do by typing or using a shortcut on VS Code. I like typing, so I'm going to type. The command that you need to use to connect to an OR is sf org login web, and then you can optionally use -s to set this OR as the default OR for this project. If we set the OR as the default OR for this project, every command that we run with the Salesforce CLI is going to apply to that OR, and it's going to interact with that OR. So I'm going to execute that command, and we're going to see how to log into that OR. So here, a page opened automatically on my browser, and this is the way in which we connect your VS Code project to the OR. Okay, here we will need to paste our username, remember, the one for the OR to which you want to connect, and then your password. You log in. It tells you, do you allow access for the Salesforce CLI? Yes, I want to allow access because I really want to connect to this OR from the Salesforce CLI. And that's it. Okay, you go back here to Visual Studio Code, and it tells you that you successfully authorized alba@thetooling.com, my username, with this OR ID. This is the unique identifier for that OR, okay, with this VS Code project. So, as I set the OR as default, we can see now at the bottom that is telling me VS Code that this is my default OR, the alba@devtooling.com. And I could change my default OR, like clicking on here and selecting another one, but this is the one that I want to use for this project, and this is the way in which I can see if it's set or not. There is a trick to see that as well. If you go to the .sfdx folder for this project and you open sfdx-config.json, this is a file that gets auto-generated when you set an OR as default. And there you can also see which is the OR that you have set at default, and even you can change it if you want. But that's a trick, okay? Because this folder is mostly auto-generated and you don't have to touch it really. And it's much simpler to change the OR through here, really. Okay, so I'm authorized with that OR. That means that from now on, if I want to push changes, to deploy changes to that OR, or to retrieve changes from that OR, I'm going to be able to do it because thanks to what we did, the Salesforce CLI is connected to the OR. Okay, and I can synchronize like my local environment to what I have here. One way, so my OR was open here, but one way to open the OR is by clicking this icon at the bottom. This is very handy. And of course, you can also open it with a command, with sfdx or open. Okay, but I'm not going to open it because it was already open. But you see, because we installed these Salesforce extensions, it's much easier to work with Salesforce from Visual Studio Code. So here I am in the OR. So let's say we're going to try to first make a declarative change. Okay, we're going to do something in the OR. We are going to configure something. When we say declarative, we sometimes say declarative, sometimes we say point and click, sometimes we say low code. It just means that you change something by configuring it here in the OR without having to code it. For instance, something that I can do is to create an app. I'm going to create an app, and I'm going to call that app Developer Tooling Demo. I'm going to stick to the default options, and to this app I'm going to add some objects that are available, such as account, and we are going to also add contacts. But we are going to see that we can also create like custom objects, which are like custom tables on the database. We can create custom pages and so on. But a lot is already created for you in Salesforce, and a lot is already automated for you. That's the beauty of the platform, right? That many things are auto created for you. Okay, so that app should be available here. We call it Developer Tooling, right? Oh, I think I need to give permissions to that app. So for instance, I'm going to create a permission set that gives me permissions to view that app. This is going to be called Developer Tooling Permission. These are declarative changes, okay? Things that I'm creating in my org that I'm going to be able to download from the org and see how they look like in XML, because all these configuration changes are really metadata changes that are reflected on an XML file. And we're going to see later how to do the other way around, like create some code in Visual Studio and push it, deploy it to the org. So here I'm going to say that the app that I want to have assigned is Developer Tooling, and I'm going to assign that permission set to my user. This is something that I'm doing like as an example, okay? But you could do whatever changes or develop whatever app you would like to develop. Okay, let me see if now I can see my app. Here it is, Developer Tooling Demo. Okay, this is the app that I have created. I have accounts, I have contacts. I can see that in the developer org some accounts already can populate it. I can create maybe a custom object. I can do that on the setup menu. For instance, let's create a custom object that is called maybe ID for IDs. As an example, if I wanted to track, for instance, in this app, which IDs are available, I'm going to create, for instance, a page for this custom object. That is something. Okay, let me do something. Let me go to the app again. And we are going to add the custom object there to the app. That's here, navigation items. I'm going to look for the object. Oh, what's happening is that I don't have access to that object either, because I need to add it into my permission set. But let's do it in a second. This was my developer tool permission. I have to look into object settings, and here I'm going to find the new ID object, and I'm going to give permissions to my user to be able to do all that. And let's see if now we can add it to the app, so that you see, if you haven't worked with Salesforce, which kind of declarative changes you can do. Developer Tooling Demo, navigation items, and now the objects should be available. Not sure why it's not popping up here. It's not popping up, sorry, because I need to create a tab first. Oh my god, sorry, I completely forgot that. I'm going to create a tab. A tab exposes that object into the UI. So I need to create a tab because I can add it to an app. And now let's go to the app manager and see if we can finally add it. So we can play a little bit more with this in Visual Studio Code. IDE. Sorry, it's not available again. I'm missing something, I believe. Maybe I need to give permissions to the tab, or maybe it's a caching issue. Sometimes we have caching issues in Salesforce when we're creating this kind of things. Let me try again, and if not, we can try to take a look at the standard objects, and that's it. This is the permission, object settings, and we're going to find that again. IDE. It says that I have all the here it is, tab settings. Okay, I need to make it available as well. Okay, let's attempt. Sorry, I'm very stubborn, and when I want to do something, I need to finish it. And that way you also learn how to debug things when something doesn't work. Oh, it's here. Yeah. Thank you very much, Abhinav, because you detected that it was already here. I don't know which moment it worked, but it worked. So it's here. Thank you very much for telling me that. And let's go to the app and take a look at that object. Okay? So here we have created a couple of things. We have created an app, we have created a custom object, etc., etc. So how can I take a look at these things that I have created in Major, but in Visual Studio Code? How can we retrieve that code, right? So here there are again several ways to do that. One very simple way is to go here to the OR browser. This is an app that gets added to Visual Studio Code when you install the extension. So, for instance, I created a custom app, right? So these are all the metadata types, all the configuration that you can create in Salesforce. And there is one called custom applications. No, custom applications, this one here. And here we can see that I created an app called Developer Tooling Demo. Is creating this listing, taking a look at what's in my OR, and from here I'm able to retrieve that component. If I go to my code, normally this is the structure that Salesforce projects have, right? And all the metadata is going to be categorized in folders. So for instance here, I can see that my app was downloaded. This is the XML file that represents the app. And here I have exactly the same configuration that I used when I defined the app in the org. Okay? So this is a way in which I can retrieve that. I can even make changes and then deploy that if I want, and do everything from Visual Studio Code and not having to do changes declaratively. This is important also for source control. I'm not going to talk about that today, but if you want to have a copy of what's in your OR, which would be the best practice, you have to retrieve all the metadata and store it in source control, and this could be the way to do it. So one way, our browser. Another way, of course, a command, right? There is a command, and we're using again the newest commands available, called sf project retrieve start, and then you need to execute or to indicate, the metadata type that you want to retrieve. So for instance, in this case, let's retrieve the custom object that we created, okay? Custom object metadata, it's defined with this keyword, custom object, and if I execute this is going to bring all the custom objects that live in my OR, but I can also indicate a custom object, a specific custom object, using like colon and then ID. Okay, this would be a way to retrieve that custom object, and we're going to see how it works. And we are going to see that now the object should be in my folder here, and again I can take a look at the definition of the object, and I could change something and deploy. For instance, let's say that we want to change the label. I detected that there is a problem with the label. I misspelled the name, and now what I can do is to push this file to the OR. Again, I could use a command, but a quick way to do that is you open here with the right button this menu, and you click on deploy this source to OR, and this is executing the Salesforce CLI command behind the scenes. Okay, if we go now to the OR, the custom object label should have been fixed. Let me take a look at that. Here it is. Okay, it's fixed. So that's like the flow that you would normally follow when you are working with functionality that is declarative, right? When you are doing changes in your OR, for instance, creating a page, right? Something that you can do that is very cool in Salesforce is, let's say that this is the default UI, this is the default UI for a contact. There is something called Lightning App Builder that you can use to change that UI, to move components around, to add more components, etc. And if you make those changes, then you can retrieve the metadata type for that page and have all those changes locally in your Salesforce project and store them in source control. Okay? So what about when I want to work with code, right? What developers do most of the time. Well, in that case, you can do the other way around, right? You can execute the workflow the other way around. We will normally start by creating code in our Visual Studio Code environment. So, for instance, let's say that I want to create an Apex class. Apex classes are there to let you implement business logic, backend business logic. So I can do that. There is again a Salesforce CLI command to create a class, but in this case I'm going to use the shortcut that gets installed with the extension, which is create Apex class. I'm going to set a file name, and I'm going to select the directory in which this class is created. But this class is only on my local environment, is not on the OR yet. So let's say that here I can write like some initialization code or whatever, right? So now if I want to push this class, to deploy this class to the Salesforce environment, to the Salesforce OR, again, something that we can do is to click here on deploy this source to OR, or I could simply run a command which is sf, I'm going to write it for you, sf project deploy start, and then you can indicate a metadata type as we did before, or you can also indicate a folder. Okay, in my case, I'm going to indicate a folder, and I'm going to say that I want to deploy the whole Force app folder in which I have all my metadata. Okay, it's not -p, -p, it should be. Let me see the help for this command. So if you want to take a look at the help for commands, you can take a look at it here or also in Google. So let me see, -x, -t, -r. Okay, -d is -d. Fantastic. So let's execute the command again, but with -d. And this has identified all the metadata that I have here on my local project and is deploying that metadata to my OR. If I go to my OR, I should have now an Apex class available. You can take a look at your Apex classes on the setup menu. You can look for Apex, and here we have Apex classes, and we see that there is, well, maybe it's too small, but there is a my class there, which is the class that we just push to the OR. Thank you, Akbar. Akbar told me that it was -d. Thank you very much. And I was used to the old commands, and now while switching, it's like too many things to remember. There is a comment from Akbar saying debugging and fixing is the most important skill. Thanks for showing all those. You are right. I completely agree. And this is why we do these lives, right? Because we can give a talk, a pre-recorded talk, and show to you like the happy path and everything working as expected, because you can like edit the video and have everything prepared. But for codeLives, we try to not prepare them like too much on purpose, so that you can understand the essence of what's like to be a Salesforce developer and what we as Salesforce developers do in our regular work lives, right? Amazing. So what else? I wanted to talk about two more topics. So one more topic that I want to explain to you are source tracked orgs. So for now, I've been using a developer org. A developer org is an org that doesn't have source tracking enabled. That means that the way in which I keep track of changes, of changes that happen in my org or in my local environment, is very manual, right? I had to go and specifically look for that developer tooling application and click on retrieve. I had to specify in my command SF project retrieve custom object and IDE, because I needed to. This command doesn't work if you just write SF project retrieve start with this kind of orgs, right? But there is something that you can activate in some orgs, which is called source tracking, and that is going to make all that happen automatic. When I activate source tracking, I'm going to be able to just write SF project retrieve start without writing anything else, and that is going to smartly detect what changed in my org or what changed in my local environment, and it's going to synchronize that. It's going to retrieve what changed, or it's going to deploy what I changed locally. Okay? So source tracking is something that you can activate in developer sandboxes. That's special kind of OR that you use for development, and also in another special kind of OR, which are called scratch orgs. Okay? So I'm going to show you how to create a scratch OR for development, and I'm going to show you how source tracking works. Sorry. So if you want to create a scratch OR from your development environment, from your developer org, you have to activate this as a dev hub. This is something that you can activate also in a production org. I'm using a development org because I'm assuming that you don't have a production org to work with, but exactly the same could be done in your production org. And if you activate this org as a dev hub, you are simply activating the ability to create scratch orgs from here. Okay? So once you have activated as a dev hub, you have to type a command to create a scratch org, which is sforg create scratch, and then you have to specify a configuration file. As we created this project with the sf project create command, there is a configuration file that comes here already by default, and this configuration file defines the features that are going to come activated in your scratch org. The features, also the kind of edition that you want it to be, and some settings for your scratch org. Okay, so for instance, we are activating Lightning experience and we are activating some mobile settings. So if I execute this, what is going to happen is that I'm going to create a scratch org from my dev hub. What happens now is that it's telling me that the specified org is not a dev hub, and this is because I'm trying to create the scratch org from another org which is not the one I'm connected to. Okay, and to be able to tell Visual Studio Code to tell this project, which is the developer hub from which we want to create scratch orgs, we need to set up another configuration variable, which is, remember that we created before, let me take a look at that, default username, right? We need to set something else, which is the default dev hub username, which now has another name with the new command syntax. So now the name of that configuration variable can be set this way. You write sfconfig set target dev hub, and then you set the name of the dev hub that you want to use. Okay? So now you see that I have a dev hub username already set there, and I should be able to execute my command and create a scratch org from there. Sometimes it happens that if you have made the connection to the org before it was a dev hub, it gives you a failure. Okay? So in that case, what you can do is to disconnect the org, which is, I think it's sf or logout, and then perform the connection again. Okay, the connection, you do sf or, let me take a look at the command, login web -s, and this is, I'm doing this so that it picks the developer hub configuration that we set before. It was alba@developertooling.com, and then my super secret password. Now it tells me that it's successfully authorized, and now this should work. Oh no, something happened. Okay, my default dev hub username, as I logged out, it was removed, so I need to set it again. Yeah. And now it should work. Yeah. Okay, so now we are creating a scratcher, and I'm going to demonstrate how we can deploy code to that scratcher with source tracking enabled in a way that we don't have to specify what changed manually, but automatically. Okay, fantastic. It told me that my scratcher is ready. I'm going to change the OR to which I'm connected to. Okay, and now it's going to be the scratcher. So basically the username that you have here is where you are sending code and from which you are retrieving code. Okay, you see that changed the default username. And now I want to work with my scratcher. Okay, so something that we can do is, for instance, let me look for the command sf project deploy start. We can run that command, and this is going to deploy my whole project to the scratcher, because everything is new, everything is not on the scratcher. Oh, okay. I'm going to remove this app because it's giving me a dependency problem, because I didn't download everything that the app points to. So I'm going to simply remove it. Something that you could do also, is to add it to force ignore. If you add something in here, that metadata is not going to be deployed, and the syntax for this is the same one that you use for git ignore. Okay, so before it deployed all the components except this one, and now it's telling me there are no local changes to deploy because all the other components were already deployed. So now we're going to open that scratcher. Remember, there is a shortcut here that we can use, open org. And here in the org, I should have, for instance, the Apex class that I just deployed. We're going to take a look at that. Oh, it's not there. Why? I'm not sure why this. Why it didn't work, I'm not sure. Let me see. Let me see if I'm in the correct OR. Oh, it's not this OR. I'm going to close the other OR to make it easier. Okay, and let's take a look at this. So let me check if I'm in the correct OR. I'm going to see if the user with which I'm connected is the correct one. Yes, it is. I'm not sure why the Apex class was not deployed. Let me refresh just in case. Okay, this is weird. Let's do something. I'm going to create another object, and we're going to see if we can debug and find out what happens here. Here we're going to create another object called second object, for instance. And we're going to try to retrieve it. We're going to do an SF project retrieve start, and we're going to see what happens. I want to make sure that the connection is working as expected. Yeah, so I'm connected to the OR because it's telling me that there is like second object is there, and it's downloaded it. So I'm not sure. Here it is. I'm not sure why my class is not appearing there. I'm going to execute the deploy again. And if not, I'm going to execute the older command. So the older command is sfdx for source push. And I'm going to try to execute it just in case there is an issue with the new command. Okay. No, it's telling me that there are no changes to deploy. I'm going to see, because the other object, the IDE object, should be in the OR as well. So I'm going to see if it's there and if I can find some more information. So here I should have an object called IDE, and it's not there either. Okay, honestly, I don't know what's happening here. This is very weird. See, if you execute the older commands, they told you, we plan to deprecate this command, use the project deploy start command. Yeah, but I'm not sure why it's not detecting that there is a class here. I'm not sure why it's not pushing it. Okay, something that I can do is to try to find this out, and I will leave some comments in the video, because this is really weird. This has never happened to me, and I'm not sure why it may be happening. And we are at time, and I don't want to take more time from you, and I'm not sure how to fix that. So I will investigate and explain why it wasn't happening. It was not working as expected in a comment on the video. The last thing that I wanted to share is that here you can see we have some warnings. This is also because of the extensions and other extensions that I'm using. And also here, if we open the package.json file, this defines the node project. This is used only for development. And here in the project that's created by default, you're going to see that there are some dependencies, some node libraries that we are importing, and this is because this is what we recommend to use for development. Some of the libraries are for formatting your code, such as Prettier or this Apex plugin. There are other libraries for linting your code to make sure that your JavaScript code is written correctly, with some plugins that are specific for Lightning Web Components, for Aura, etc. And there are other libraries that we use for testing, for instance, and so on. Okay, so for these libraries to work, you need to execute npm install. What npm install is doing is to download those libraries from the npm repository and store them in your local folder, in your local project. And then, if you see here a section called scripts, that means that if you write npm run and then any of these keywords, this script is going to run. And these scripts basically allow you to execute those libraries over your code. We're going to wait for a minute for this to finish, and we're going to execute at least the formatter command so that you see how useful it is to use this developer tooling. Okay, I have some comments in the chat. EKC is telling me maybe we can try with Newer. Peter told me if you try to use the user interface instead of the command, you mean, yeah, so, but I don't want to use the user interface, because with the user interface, if you click on Interesting. So here is not giving to me the option to deploy the component. So I'm not sure why. Let me see. No, it's not giving me the option to do it through the UI. So I'm not sure why that's happening. Okay, so it finished downloading my libraries. If you take a look at your project, there is a node modules folder, and you can see like all the libraries that were downloaded there. And now we can execute, in the terminal, these commands. For instance, I can run npm run prettier, which is the formatter, and this is going to take all my files and format them following a configuration that is defined here. And this is something that you can change for your projects. Okay, and this, as you can see here, has taken my files and format them. Here I'm having an issue, I don't know why. But basically this is what prettier does. Or you can run the linter as well, and you can like execute lots of actions over your code to make sure that your code is at the quality that you expect. Also, this helps with continuous integration, because as this is something that you can execute from a command line, it's something that you can automate. And for instance, you could tell a continuous integration system to execute all these tasks when you are like pushing commits to a Git repo, for instance. And it's like super important to start adopting these practices and start becoming more efficient as developers. I'm going to work on a series of videos called DevOps Essentials, in which you will be able to learn more about this. Okay, but for today I need to stop because we are already at time. It always happens the same to me. I think I talk a lot, so sorry for that. I will tell you what happened with the push command, the deploy command, and I will share all the links that I shared today in the description of the video. Okay, I wanted to say thank you for all the people who connected, all the people that were active in the chat. That's super useful. Thank you so much also for your tips when I got stuck, and I hope to see you the next time. Okay, hope that you have a great week and a great rest of your day. Bye bye. Guys, sorry, I'm back. So this is funny because I just execute the command and it worked. So I'm not sure what was happening before. I just executed like the old command sfdx force source push, and it worked.